Hi, I'm John Coggan. I'm Professor of Law in the Centre for Health, Law and Society at the University of Bristol Law School, and I'm a part of the UK Pandemic Ethics Accelerator. The Ethics Accelerator has brought ethical perspectives to bear on the big questions that governments, communities, organisations and individuals across the UK have faced since the onset of the pandemic. In May 2022, we brought together experts from academia, the law, public health, medical publishing, journalism, and formal and informal advisory roles to policymakers to reflect on their experiences of the pandemic and what we had learned about the place of values in public policy and decision making. In this film, our speakers consider how we might build more robust structures for making sure that ethical issues are considered, not just in pandemics, but throughout our public decision making.
It is really important that people who understand and are interested and care about ethics are in the room, but it's equally important that there are people outside the room holding up a mirror to decisions and enabling us to have critical reflection. If you don't have people in the room, it's highly probable that ethical issues are overlooked. If you do have people in the room, of course, they risk being captured. So we want to have people who care about ethics close to decision making, but we also want to have people independent of that if we're going to have an effective system.
Some of the questions we talk about today seem to be about potential sort of failures to comply with those principles of ethics of public life, and others seem to come down much more to questions about, well, how do we get these particularly sort of knotty ethical questions which arise particularly in the context of the pandemic? How do we sort through those where there may be reasonable differences of opinion?
I should stress, by the way, from Independent Sage, we've actually gone through and we've published a paper looking at our experience. We've never actually disagreed with anything that Sage ever said, never. But where we've been different is that we can go beyond what they do. So on the bits where we overlap, we've been completely consistent. Where we have differed is that we can actually engage much more with the public and with stakeholders, and we can look at the policy implications and we can get feedback.
I was interested in those under the radar ethical issues. They became a really important focus for my FT columns through the pandemic because they bothered me. I couldn't understand the decisions and I had to explain them to readers or challenge them, and they made me think about very fundamental things. So what is the purpose of government in a health crisis? What are a government's duties and responsibilities to citizens? How are ethical considerations weighed and included in policy making? Where is the transparency so they can be debated and challenged outside Whitehall? And I covered those issues because I felt I could and I should as an outside observer that had some influence.
I think it's a real strength of our democracy that independent organisations like the Health Foundation can commission evidence gathering, novel analysis, and we managed to do that in terms of absent voices, those digitally excluded prisoners and others whose experiences were part of what was synthesized within the inquiry. So absolutely, I think it's really, really important that these organisations exist and their work is possible.
If you go outside, it's about having this public consultation, having a view on what people broadly think is the right thing to do. And that's the other thing, is that you're never going to get everybody agreeing on what the right thing to do is. But you can get surprisingly broad agreement about what's sensible in a crisis.
I think that there are some sort of aspects of ethics which the law is kind of happier grappling with. And so things to do with transparency and consultation and accountability and all of that, there's a sort of recognised way of dealing with those sorts of concepts. And there's a sort of baseline, which is, consultation is probably a good thing and so on. And whereas in things like, resource allocation and critical care beds, you can imagine that's just so much harder from a judge's point of view to sort of get involved in.
So my key claim, my last remark, is that if we're thinking about the effective ethical advice, we should think about it as an ecosystem, and we shouldn't examine specific components, rather as I've done in this talk separately, as if they could achieve all the things we need from ethical advice each and every time it's offered. We should ask ourselves whether the net impact of the ecosystem that we have in place is that public decision making is sufficiently informed by ethical expertise.